This is lesson 3.3, comparing and ordering rational numbers, and this is textbook page 59. The essential question: how do you compare and order rational numbers? And we start this lesson with a explore activity. Try this as best you can, and then when you're ready for hints or to check your answers, you can watch the video. Equivalent fractions and decimals. Fractions and decimals that represent the same value are equivalent. The number line shows equivalent fractions and decimals from 0 to 1. I want you to notice what it's talking about. This point right here would be 0, and this point right here would be 1. And in between 0 and 1 are a bunch of fractions and decimals. Question A reads, complete the number line by writing the missing decimals or fractions. If we go along the top, it's really pretty simple. You should notice right off the bat that you go from 0 to 0.2. Well, obviously what's missing there is 0 and 1/10. And the cool thing about this is that right here, this point right here, is called 1/10. And it's called 1/10 whether it's written as a fraction, 1 over 10, or whether it's called 1/10, a 1 written in the tenths place. The next one's 2/10, 3/10, 4/10. Obviously, based on the pattern, the next one has to be 5/10, 6/10, 7/10. 0 and 8/10, 9/10, and then the last one would be 1 whole. So most kids understand the decimals pretty good. Sometimes the fractions get a little bit tricky though, because if you just look at the bottom here, if you were to write 1/10 and then if you wrote 2/10 here, and then 3/10, that's a perfect pattern, but then notice we don't go to 4/10 here. And it should be, because it's a 4 and it's in the tenths place. Shouldn't this be 4/10? Well, that's the deal. 4/10 is actually equivalent to 2/5, and I'm going to show you why. And then I'll show you why this answer is not very good. 4/10 is equivalent to 2/5, and 2/5 is the better answer because 4 and 10 share a factor of 2. So really I should be simplifying. Now check this out. What is 4 divided by 2? It's 2. And what is 10 divided by 2? It's 5. And that's why 4 over 10 is not improper, it's just not the best answer. And 2/10 is not the best answer. And here's why. 2 and 10 share a factor of 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. I'm going to make it blue here. 2 divided by, so I'm back here. Remember I had 2/10 written there? 2/10. 2 and 10 are each divisible by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. So the better answer there is 1/5. And the only problem with this is that it doesn't follow a nice pattern. If it's following a nice pattern, it would be 1 over 10, 2 over 10, 3 over 10. And 1 over 10 is there, and 3 over 10 is there, and that's because they don't simplify. But this place right here, that would be 2 over 10, that simplifies to 1/5. And then this one would be 4 over 10, that simplifies to 2/5. And then this one would be 5 over 10, and that simplifies to 1/2. And we've got 3/5. Now what would this one be? It's a 7 in the tenths place. 7 over 10, does that simplify? It doesn't. So the answer is just 7/10. And that's all the missing ones, so we can move on. Question B writes, use the number line to find a fraction that is equivalent to 0.25, and then explain it. Now where would 0.25 be? I think what I'm going to do here to show you 0.25 is I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and in order to do that I need to erase. So here's what I'm going to do. Check this out. Where would 0.25 be? Well, this one right here could be thought of as 0.20, and this one could be thought of as 0.30, and 25 would be right in the middle. It would be right 25, 0.25 goes right in between those 2 points, and look at what it's pointing at. It's pointing at this arrow right here, which is 1/4. And so I want to point out to you, I'll highlight, I want to point out to you that 0 and 25/100 is equivalent to 1/4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink this, and I think my writing won't shrink with it. Yeah, that kind of messed it up. That's okay. It is no big deal. We know that the point is right here, and we know it's 0 and 25/100. And it says explain. I would say 0 and 25/100 is equal to 1/4. And there's different ways to explain it. I mean, we could be complicated or we could be simple. One way to explain why they're equivalent is to do this right here. 0 and 25/100 would be 25/100. And if you think about money, 25/100 would be 1/4 or 1/4 of a dollar. So that's how I can help you remember. That's how you can remember that 25 hundredths, kind of like 25 cents. 25 hundredths is the same thing as 1/4. So let's go ahead and check out question C. It says, explain how to use a number line to find a decimal equivalent to 1 7/10. So I need to know what 1 7/10 is equal to as a decimal. It says explain how to use a number line. Well, if we use this number line up here, it doesn't really work. We do have 7/10. If you think about it, we have 7/10 right here. But this is 0 7/10, and I need 1 7/10. So how could I use a number line for that? Well, it's going to be the same thing as 0 7/10, except for it's going to be past 1. In other words, 1 7/10 is the same thing as 1 plus 7/10. And since 7/10 is equal to 0.7, 1 7/10 is equal to 1.7. So it's kind of the same thing as 0.7, except for it's a whole number. And the other way I could use a number line is I could go up here and I could say, well, I could pretend that this is 1 right here, and that this right here is 2. And so what would this point right here be? It would be 1.7. So it's kind of the same thing as 0.7, it's just 1.7. And it says explain, and I don't know that this is a great explanation. I hope you understand what I just showed you, but that's probably about as good as we're going to be able to do. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to question D. And we've got some equivalents here, and I think I can use my number line to use these. It says use the number line to complete each statement. 0.2 equals, and again, a lot of kids want to think it's going to be a lot of kids right here think it's going to be 2 over 10. And you can even write 2 over 10 as long as you're willing to simplify it to the better answer, which is 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. The best answer is 1/5. And 3/10 right here, we just go look at our number line. 3/10 is equal to 0.3. And 75 hundredths, that's not on here, but it's kind of like what I did earlier. Remember how I could make this 0.8? And then if I zoomed in, I can make this 0.70, and this would be 0.80. And 75 would be right in between them, which is right here. Or you might even say to yourself, that's like 75 cents, that's 3/4. 3/4 is 3/4 of a dollar. This is one you're definitely going to memorize. This would be another good one for money. 1 25 hundredths. That's like $1.25. So you have 1 whole dollar, and then you have 1/4. 1 1/4. Do your best to memorize those, especially the ones that are 25 cents and 75 cents. Those are just like money. So whenever you see those are pretty easy to memorize. All right, let's check out the bottom of the page. Reflect number 1 says, communicate mathematical ideas. How does a number line represent equivalent fractions and decimals? Well, what it does is it shows the equivalent decimals and fractions as the same point, with the decimals, and it could be reversed, but with the decimals on top, with the decimal on top and fraction on the bottom. So if you just go find one point, you can look to the top and you'll see the decimal, and if you look to the bottom, you'll see the fraction. In question number 2, it says name a decimal between 0.4 and 0.5. Some kids would look at that and say, well, that's not possible. There's nothing between a 4 and a 5. But this is the kind of thing where you need to think about it as, is there something between 40 and 50? All you have to do is annex a 0 to the end of that and the end of that, and then the answers become unlimited. The one exactly in the middle would be 0.45, but there's tons of answers. There's also 0.41, 0.42. If you wanted to go all the way to the other end, you could do 0.49. There's actually unlimited answers there. So answers vary. It just asks you to name one. If you name any of them, that would be just fine right there. Okay, good job. We are done with page 59.